She have done that already once.
How's everyone going to see?
Okay, so wow, so nice.
Yeah, this is so cool. Just get a picture. My camera's crap.
Welcome everyone. We are so happy to have you with us tonight. We've done with this event is the event number 6. It's an amazing journey that we are going so far because of you guys as well, because you are with us. Joe and I started this Entrepreneur of Lantau a couple of months ago to get the community together. Entrepreneur, there is so many amazing people in Lantau, and we wanted we wanted them to share their experience and learn from them as well.
We got most of you in the room today, haven't we? Amazing people.
Yeah. And what we want as well is to create links between each other in that community. Lantau is such an amazing community, and yeah.
Now, one of the things that has really, it wasn't how we wanted, it wasn't what we started this for, but because we asked for a donation from everybody who's come to each event, and I know it's a small amount, which is $100, but it's made a huge difference to many people over the last few events. And today we have one particular person that Jerome's going to tell us about, that we're actually going to be donating all of the money that you guys have given for this event. So I think I'm going to hand over to Jerome.
Her name is Diane. She's from Philippines and she's married with 2 kids, and she's living with her mother. She's studying to become an accountant, plus she's working at the Vitality Center in Central, and she has been diagnosed with a cervic cancer. So she will have a surgery, beginning of surgery, and she needs help. Sorry?
Beginning of February.
What did you say?
Surgery.
She will need a surgery beginning of February, sorry. She needs help financially to suffer her medical care and loss of income during the process, right?
But also, she's 30 years old.
She's 30 years old, yeah.
So she went too young, so sorry, I introduced her to the point. She's working with me in Central, and I'm happy to help her because she's already a good person,
and the idea as well is together, yes, we bring money to help people and to have a positive impact on people who really need it.
And for those who are new today, we've helped a refugee who was in real need of money, who just had a child. We've helped another domestic helper who ultimately she was told she hadn't got very long to live, and so we helped her with money to go back home and to do that. We helped, on a more positive note, we helped a domestic helper for a year so that she could run, literally, so she could run in races. So we're looking for ideas, and guys, if you come up with anything that relate, but we don't give to charity, we give to one person, to an individual. So if anybody has an idea, and it doesn't have to be a negative idea, you know, it could be something that's positive, that's really helping someone achieve something that's good, even if it's something to do with education, something to do with maybe helping with a computer or whatever it may be. We're open to, there's many different ideas, but we, you know, as a collective, it's great that we're able to, you know, just help. And each event we do, we know that we're coming here and we're actually helping one person, whether it's big or small. Anyway, we'll move on from that. We've got Scottie here.
Scottie as well. Just before that, we have obviously our WhatsApp group. We have created a Facebook page LinkedIn page. We will create a website as well.
Well, it's going to be a page that relates so that we can have a directory on it. So that because people are starting to ask what individuals do, and so we're going to not just what they do, they want to find things. So we're going to have a directory. We haven't done it yet. I've sort of looked at it. I think it can be done, but what I would like it to be, so all the members, you put what you do for a living within the membership that will be set up, and within that, then if you're a member, you can look within the members at the directory, and that's what we're looking to do, so that, because we've found people asking, do people do this or do they do that? So it would be great if there was one collective area that we can do it. It might not happen overnight, but that's the next aim for that.
We need to highlight Dan as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. Obviously, he's recording our speech today. Yeah.
We're going to do that from now on, so that you can watch this, and if you want to go back to it, you can watch it again if you miss it. You know, so we're going to start doing that, so that'll go online as well. Yeah. So a few things happening, and if anyone got ideas, we could make it better. Yeah. We'll do it. And now I think.
No.
I think we've got to introduce Scott. Now, Scott, I know Scottie from, well, interesting. I'll tell the story about Scottie and I. I used to sit there drinking away like a proper alcoholic that I was. And I used to see this unbelievable guy just keep running past me. And he was always so determined and so focused. And I was a little bit in awe of him, if I'll be honest with you. And he used to grunt and say hello as he passed, and but he was so focused in what he was doing, and he was going places. You know, you could really see that. And then I'm very lucky that I've got to know him because I started running, and we started running together, and he helped me with my 5 trails, and we've been on a few adventures running together, which has been amazing. So I've got to know Scottie. And now realise he is that person who runs, and he's very focused and very goal setting. But I really can't wait to hear his story of how he's come from where he was, which was living in a shack pretty much, to travelling the world and becoming one of the best in his business, which is coffee, and now obviously owning Fineprint, which he has, 9 shops around?
7. Yeah.
7 shops.
Soon 9.
What's going on?
Soon 9.
What's going on? You've had 7 shops for a week. And, he's expanding and where he's coming from. So we're super excited to have Scottie. So let's all give him a huge welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you for obliging me, everyone. The talk that I put together, I've tried to make it as interesting as possible. I'll try and be focused on the things that are actually interesting. Essentially what I've done, the talk that I've put together, is part of it is really, first of all, it's my journey. Just talking about how I where I came from, which was a fairly poor family in Australia, living, what's that slide? I'll get there in a sec. But yeah, fairly poor family in Australia. And I guess how I went from there to becoming, I don't know any other way to say this. Australians are fairly self-effacing, so we don't like to sort of talk about ourselves and our success. It's frowned upon in my country. But essentially what happened was I went from being living in a shack, as Joe mentioned, in a place called Hornsby in Sydney, to becoming world famous in the international coffee industry. So that's I'll just share that journey. How I got into ultramarathon running, and then starting Fineprint and building Fineprint is kind of my journey. And then leadership lessons I've learned. I'm pretty passionate about the topic of leadership. It's pretty important to me, but we'll get to that. So yeah, that's what I've put together. So part 1, learning and the foundations of my career. So this is where I lived when I was 20 years old. My friends and my family, we all gave this house, we all called it the hovel. So my friends and I lived in the hovel. At any given time, there might have been 4 to 9 boys living in this house. We paid $40 Australian a week rent between like 4 to 9 of us. We had like a fireplace at the backyard. One day we got bored, and so we drilled holes in the bedrooms and to make a putt-putt golf course. And each of the bedrooms was a green. So it was a typical sort of Australian boys will be boys experience. And obviously we're all university students. I didn't have a job, and that was where we lived. This was my bedroom. And it actually was a toilet before we turned it. Before you turned it. Before we turned. It was honestly, it used to be a toilet. We ripped out the toilet and we sort of clogged up the toilet, and then I actually tiled the walls, as you can see, with new pieces of newspaper. And then there's a ladder here, and we built like a mezzanine, which was where I slept. One night in the middle of the night, the mezzanine collapsed and I fell, and all my friends heard the noise and thought that I'd died. Anyway, so that's where I used to live. That's just me. I just thought I'd throw that photo in there because it's a funny photo of myself back then. Yeah, that's where we used to live. So at that time, as I said, I didn't have a job. I was at this cafe with my girlfriend at the time. They had a sign up that said, looking for staff. I had no direction in life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was having a few days before that, I was talking to my dad, what I'm going to do with my life. And Dad said, well, son, you can't move a sailing boat. You can't steer a sailing boat that doesn't have the sails up. So start doing something. So that kind of stuck in my head when I was sitting in this cafe. So I asked I said, oh, can I apply for this job? So I sat down with the interview, and the manager of the owner of the cafe pointed at the coffee machine and said, do you know how to operate that thing? I had no idea. And I said, yes. So she said, I will come tomorrow morning for a trial shift. The following morning, I think my trial was at 8 a.m. Jemima was my girlfriend at the time, and I ran around her. She was working in a restaurant. So I went around to her, I snuck around her bedroom, climbed in her bedroom window at like 5 a.m, woke her up and said, can you give me like a 1 or 2 hour course in making coffee? and so I did the trial shift. I didn't end up making any coffee at all. They had me chopping lettuce all day. But anyway, I got the job. But this is where my coffee career began. I had no idea how to make coffee. One day the coffee supplier said, do you want to come to the coffee roasting facility and see how all the coffee roasting is done? And I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. Let's do that. So I went there, did that, and that's when I fell in love with coffee. I saw like there was unroasted coffee green beans that I saw for the first time. There was coffee roasting. I saw the romance of it, and that's where I sort of realized for me, I was like, oh, this is an interesting. I love cooking. and that's where I fell in love with coffee. And at that time, this guy, very handsome man, Paul Bassett, he's an Australian guy, and he won the World Barista Championship. So I heard that an Australian had won the World Barista Championship. I was kind of inspired by that. I went and watched him give a talk, and I decided I don't know why, but when I'm the kind of person that, as Joe will probably attest to, is once I decide I'm going to do something, or once I get into something, I'm not capable of doing it anything other than 500%. Probably most of the people in this room are possibly similar. That's my nature, and so when I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I decided pretty much when I heard him give that talk, I wanted to win the World Barista Championship. So essentially, for the next, from that point onwards, for the next 5 to 10 years, I just had this relentless pursuit to just become the best I possibly could at coffee. If I wasn't working in the best espresso bar cafe in town, that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to get it, and I wanted to get a job, and I ended up getting a job in what was known as the best espresso bar coffee roastery in town, which was a place called Toby's Estate in Woolloomooloo in Sydney. On my day off, I would come in and sit next to the person whose job was roasting coffee, and I would sit next to him roasting coffee, and I would just watch. And any chance I would get to glean some knowledge off him, I would just learn from him. And this was pretty much my approach for about that was probably 5 to 6 years, I guess, until this point. This point here, where I was competing in barista competitions, and in particular this point here. So I'd been a barista at this point for about I don't know how long, maybe 5 years, 6 years. And I had a relentless pursuit to be really good at latte art, putting the patterns in tops of coffees. And the coffee roaster who I used to go and watch roast coffee, his name was Dean Morgan, he came up to me and said, the World Latte Art Championship is in 2 months in Bern, Switzerland. I'd never travelled the world in my life. Grew up in the country town in Australia, lived in Sydney, I'd never been overseas, didn't even have a passport. And I said, oh, sure, I'd love the opportunity. I can't afford that though. And he said, oh, it's okay, I'm pretty sure I can put some money together with some friends. We need to get the permission from the Specialty Coffee Association of Australia. And we'll see if that's okay, if they're okay with it. And so they put the pieces together, it was approved. So once it was approved, I quit my job and I went out to Dean's coffee roastery every day. I would drive to his coffee roastery. I had a little old Suzuki Swift. It was like a 1960s, a little old bomb car. And on the way out to the Dean's roastery, I would pick up 2 crates of milk from the supermarket, and I would go to Dean's roastery, and I just practiced doing latte art every day, all day for the next month. And then I hopped on a plane to Bern, Switzerland. I literally just had like my suitcase with my clothes and 1 bag with my milk steaming pitcher and my 6 cups that I had to put patterns in. And this is me competing in the World Latte Art Championship. You can't see it, you can see the intensity in my face. I was pretty like, I was pretty, but what you can't see in this photo, I was shaking like no hell. I'm literally like this, and I'm just like, stop shaking, you know. But anyway, long story short, I won, and I became the World Latte Art champion that day.
On the first go.
Yeah. It was after 6 years of intense practice, and but ever since then, it's not like this in every country in the world, but you know, those of you who are Australians will know this. Those of you who have Australian friends will know this. Those of you who have been to Australia will know we're a bit nuts about coffee. And so if you win the World Latte Art Championship or the World Barista Championship in Australia, Australians love you. You know, so I went from no one knowing who I was, and I went back to Australia, and I was on Sunrise on Prime National Television. I was like on the front cover of the newspaper. And it was a really fun time. But also in the coffee industry, also my life changed. All of a sudden, I didn't have to get a job in a cafe anymore. I could get a job working for a coffee roasting business, and get a higher salary and so on and so forth. And so from that point onwards, for the next 10 years, becoming the World Latte Art Championship really did transform my life. It's only becoming the best in the world at making pretty patterns in coffees, but for me it changed my life. And it changed my life because it just meant that all this sort of stuff happened. So if you go onto Google and you Google Scottie Callaghan coffee, this is what you get. You just get, like, you know, there's all sorts of stuff that's happened in my life, from articles about me in cafes or traveling the world to visit coffee conferences and so on and so forth. But the really important thing that happened over this, from there or for the next 10, 15 years, is I grew. I learned a lot. Because when you're an uneducated country boy, you know, who, if I spoke to you how I spoke back then, like, g'day mate, how you going? You know, I was very different back then to how I am now. Not that how we speak necessarily matters, but I learned, like, I had to learn how to write. So, because I was a famous coffee person, had this amazing coffee knowledge, but I couldn't write. So someone asked me to write a column for a magazine once every month, and the first time I wrote the column for the magazine, the editor called me up and said, "Scotty, what the hell is this? This is shit," you know. And she's like, "Sorry, you've just got to do that again." So I said, "Well, can you like edit it and send it to me? What's wrong?" So she basically, I sent like 2 pages, she sent 6 pages. You know, like, what's wrong with it? You know. So I had to learn how to write. You know, and then people said, invited me to come over to Indonesia to teach latte art. I knew how to do latte art, but I didn't know how to teach it. And so for the next 10, 15 years, I learned how to write, I learned how to teach, and I guess I grew as a person. I got to travel the world. This is me in Peru this is Dionisio. There's a friend. There's a friend from Lima, Peru. This is a German friend of mine. This is Dionisio, the owner of the coffee farm. To this day, so Dionisio's coffee has a farm in Peru. His coffee is still in Fineprint house blend to this day. which is a really cool story. Another story to tell, but it's a cool story. That's me teaching coffee farmers in Peru about coffee stuff, which is a pretty humbling experience. Yeah, well, coffee producers in the producing world, they don't understand their product. Same as cocaine. This is in Colombia, visiting a Colombian coffee producers. This is competing in the World Barista Championships in London in 2010. This is me picking coffee in Sumatra. So long story short, this is some of the industry accolades. I won the World Lantau Championship. I came third place in the World Barista Championship. 2 times Australian Barista Champion, New South Wales Barista Championship. I did some Lantau videos on YouTube, and at the time they had 2 million views. I was asked to write a book. And then I worked for this company, Bellaroma Coffee in Australia, for 4 years. And a lot of what I learned, the combination of my coffee skill and knowledge and what I learned at Bellaroma Coffee for business management is kind of what I've all put into Fineprint and building Fineprint. And then co-founder Fineprint. So yeah, part 3, ultramarathons. So that's kind of my coffee career, very quickly. Not the end of my career, but sort of how I got to where I am today. And then we ended up in Hong Kong. One day I was back in my old business company that I worked for in Australia, and I just started getting into running. I ran a 10-kilometre race. I ran it in 52 minutes, my first race ever, super fast. Not really. And my friend said to me, "Oh, you should try running a marathon." I said, "Oh, what's a good time to try and run a marathon?" And he said, "Oh, most people who run marathons and have a goal try and do it in sub 4 hours." And I said, "Oh, that seems a bit slow." He said, "Well, what about sub 3 hours? Can anyone have that goal?" And he said, "Oh, Scotty, it's like very, very few people ever can achieve that." And that was like a red rag to a bull for me, to me. So anyway, I made the goal to do a sub 3 hour marathon. Point being, we ended up in Hong Kong when I was training for the Hong Kong Marathon, and living in Discovery Bay when we first lived in Hong Kong. There's nowhere to train for a marathon in Hong Kong. I was just doing loops in Discovery Bay, going batshit crazy because it's just like loop, and too many hills. So I ended up in the mountains, and my coach said, "Oh, you need to sign up for about a 14-kilometre race as a sort of test your fitness." I did that. It was a trail race. Started in Discovery Bay, went up over Tiger's Head and over to Pak Mong and back to Tiger's Head. It was Lantau 50. The Lantau 50, then they had a 25 and a 14, and that was how I got into trail running, into ultramarathons. I ran a 14-kilometre race that day, and then I just always wanted to do longer and longer ultramarathons. So I don't know why. I was pretty busy sort of with my coffee career and being successful in that. Why I bolted on ultramarathons, I couldn't tell you why. Why do people get into running ultramarathons? I don't know. But this is just me running the Lantau 70 one year. That's the running Trail Walker 1 year. Good beard, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know what that race that was. This is the Trans Lantau 100. So over the last 8-9 years, I've run North Face 100 5 times, Lantau 70 5 times, Trail Walker, Trans Lantau multiple times, Moontracker multiple times, Lantau 50, and so just and then I did do a sub 3 hour marathon where I got 2:59:50. One of in all of my running career, the hardest I've ever run is when I saw that clock in the last 100 meters of the marathon.
Where was it?
The marathon,
Yeah.
Hong Kong Marathon. Yeah.
Hong Kong Marathon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough marathon. Yeah, I wish I was that fit in Boston or something. But anyway, so that's very briefly my trail running, ultra marathon running. I love the mountains. I think I love the ultra marathons of the mountains because living in Hong Kong, so much city. It's kind of the escape to get out of the city and into the mountains and into the countryside. Okay, so that's my trail running achievements. So Fineprint. So we ended up in Hong Kong. So how we ended up in Hong Kong was I was working in Australia for a coffee company. I had a great job. Actually, the CEO of the company sat me down one day and So no, we were just having a talk one day, like a debrief about how things are going and so on and so forth. I was sort of talking to him about, okay, what can I be doing? What am I doing well? What am I not doing well? And he said, and Tim, I think he was a bit busy, and he said, look, Scotty, he said, to be honest with you, you could sit at your desk all day long and do nothing, and we'll make money out of you. So don't worry about it. Because they marketed me as the sort of like endorsement of the company and all that sort of stuff. But that I didn't like that. Like, I'm a driven person, I'm a motivated person. I don't want someone to say sit at your desk all day long doing nothing. I want them to say, I don't know, achieve this, kick this goal, So, and then not long after that, I was offered a job in Hong Kong to come and help. Did anyone here heard of Holly Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah, Holly Brown was like a startup cafe in Hong Kong.
Coffee place for a while.
It was doing. They did well for a while. So anyway, I came to Hong Kong to work for them. The reason I took the job was risk versus security. So, I had a great job in Australia, company car, international travel. Pretty much anytime I went up to the CEO and said, "Hey, can I go to Bern, Switzerland, and judge in the World Lantau Championship?" He's like, "Sure, go." And then to come and tell me to Hong Kong. So, but while working at Holly Brown in Hong Kong, what happened? I think with a lot of entrepreneurs in Hong Kong, I think what happens is you come here as an employee, and whatever country we come from, there's a product that we're aware of, that we're familiar with, and we see it doesn't exist in Hong Kong. We see an opportunity here. I think that happens a lot in Hong Kong. I know a few expats who and that's what happened with me. I walked the streets 10, 15 years ago in Soho, and there was no cafes. There was no, now there's a proliferation of cafes all over Hong Kong as they've blown up. But back then there was no, the coffee shops opened at 9 a.m. if you're lucky. And that was a frustration for me. And so I had this vision to start my own cafe. But what really put me off all the time was the rent. It's just such a risk. You sign a lease, you got to pay for a small little place $70,000 a month, $2 million fit out. And would it really work? We're willing to risk all that money. And so I didn't do it for some time until one day I got a message on Facebook by a guy named James Wilson. He just reached out and said, "Hey, I heard you're in Hong Kong. I own this bar in Soho. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind meeting, having a coffee. I've got some business ideas." So I met him at the Cupping Room in Central. This was in 2015, 2016. And he said, essentially he's got this bar. So who's been to Fineprint on Pill Street? Has anyone here been to Fineprint on Pill Street? So that's the first Fineprint. And that was the bar that James owned. The same design today was his design. And what he said, well, why don't you run an espresso bar during the day and I'll run my bar at night? And I thought, well, this is not a bad idea. I did sort of on the back of an envelope, I thought how much it's going to cost me to proof of concept for what I wanted to do, which was essentially an Australian-style espresso bar in Hong Kong. Latte, cappuccino, avocado toast, jam on toast, so on and so forth. And I thought it might cost me $200,000 to sort of buy the equipment that I needed instead of a $2 million fit out, and I could sort of do a proof of concept. So that's how we started. And back then, what we were doing is 7 years ago. He ran a bar at night, and what I was calling it at that time was I called it Pill Street Espresso Bar. And then when we opened that shop for the first 9 months, I was on the 3:40 a.m. ferry from Wee Waa 6 days a week. So 6 days a week, my alarm would go off at 3 a.m. I was on the 3:40 a.m. ferry, and I worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, to start what is now Fineprint. I look back on those days, and there were some days where, well, the first day of revenue was 250 Hong Kong dollars. That was day one. And there were some days where I was so tired that I would say to the staff, "I'm just going to go and lock the bathroom door and have a power nap on the floor." So, so there's a little bathroom at Pill Street. I would lie on the concrete floor in there and just have a little bit of a power nap. And in the mornings, we didn't open until 6 a.m. I would catch the 3:40 a.m. ferry over. So I'd get into the shop at 4:10, 4:20. We didn't open until 6. I didn't really have to start work until 5. So I would get there a bit early. So I would take a jumper with me and I would just lie on the concrete floor on Pill Street there in Fineprint just to get a little 20-minute power nap. I'd set the alarm and get a little bit for a 20-minute power nap before getting to work. But after about 9 months, what we were doing during the day really just started to become successful. Started to get traction. What James was doing at night, he was a banker. he didn't run the bar at night. It was run pretty shit, to be honest, from the manager he had there running it. And so James and I had a coffee one day, and we said, well, why don't we collapse this arrangement and start a joint venture? And that's when Fineprint was born. So it was a very quick conversation coming up with the name Fineprint. I've created 2 brands previously, and so I really didn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about what name we should come up with. James said, well, you know, I've always liked the name Fineprint. What do you think about that name? And I've got a rule when it comes to coming up with a brand name. I think a brand name should be one word. It's my personal sort of idea. I think it's because it's just simple and easier. I think it should have a hard consonant and a soft vowel. And I got that from Starbucks. There's a book called Starbucked. It's written about Starbucks, but from an analytical perspective, they say, and analysts say, one of the reasons for Starbucks is a successful brand is because it's got soft consonants and hard vowels. It's soft, but it's strong. You think about it. So anyway, that Fineprint, and then Fineprint was born. Started the joint venture. Sleepless nights and long, hard days, as I told you about. There were many times in those early days where I would lie in bed midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., my heart racing, and I couldn't sleep because we didn't make profit in Fineprint on Peel Street for the first 2 years, really. There's an interesting story where I had 2 business partners who were involved in Fineprint in the early days. The lease was coming up. And we had the lease, and they were like, "We want out. We want to cancel the lease. We want to close the shop." I said, "I really believe in this. I just really want to make this work." So I bought them out. We were running at a loss, and then 2 months later was the first time we started getting to net profit. So serendipitous, but it was anyway. It's a good news story for me. So then we opened the second Fineprint in Tai Hang. And going from 1 shop to 2 shops for me was easy because when you own an F&B business, it's easy to run 1 shop because you can be very hands-on as a business owner. But when you go to, for me, when going to the 3rd shop in Sayampoon, that was for me the real challenge because I've always heard that if you can run 3, you can run 20. Because that's running 3 is when you've really got to be focused on your systems. You've got to have your operations manual, you've got to have your systems, you've got to have your standards, you've got to be training staff, you've got to take it to another sort of business level. So that was a pretty stressful time opening the third Fineprint. And then we opened the 4th Fineprint in HKU, and then 5, 6, and 7th Fineprint. So that's over 7 years we went from 1 Fineprint to 7 Fineprints. For me, the early days were much harder than nowadays, because nowadays I get to do, I guess what I really want to do, which is leadership and management and team building and so on and so forth. But that's a very short snippet of sort of the growth of Fineprint and how we've built Fineprint. You can answer any questions about it later on. Okay, so leadership lessons I have learnt in building Fineprint. So if you drink a lot of coffee, plus run a lot, you become boss man. All right, talk over. Okay. So what I would say. So first of all, yeah, there's a difference between management and leadership. So for me, what I'm a really big believer in is in business, and I from my experience, I find it quite often people don't necessarily agree with this or see this, but a lot of people in business think that business is about spreadsheets and numbers and systems and processes. And of course, we have to have all of that. But for me, that's kind of a no-brainer. The real test, the real challenge is whether or not we understand emotional intelligence, leadership, connecting with people. Things like if you think you're a leader, if you turn around, are there people following you? Stuff like that. That for me is whether or not you can really be successful in business and in leadership. And so I really believe there's a big difference between management and leadership. For me, managers focus on spreadsheets, checklists, and the like. Leaders focus on people, culture, outcomes, vision, mission. And that's so for me at Fineprint, I'm massive on systems. Like the system is the system is the system. I say that all the time. We've got an operations manual, we've got staff handbook, we've got a lot of measurement, but I don't think that's what creates success. I think what creates success is we've got 7 shops, and I walk into any one of our 7 shops, and I don't say anything to the store managers, because I'll sit there. There might be 10 things I notice that I'm not happy with, but I will never say a thing to the store manager, because I've got an operations director who the store manager reports to, and if I go and try and micromanage the store manager, then that's just going to piss off the operations director. That's leadership. When we're in meetings and we're talking about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, I say we and not I. And you can sort of talk about, when it comes to leadership, I'm sure all of us know there's a whole myriad of things which I'm talking about which come down to leadership. There's 100 or 50 or 1,000 of them. But the real challenge is, do we have the emotional intelligence? Do we have the maturity to, when you own a cafe and you walk in and you see something you're not happy with, do you have the maturity, the emotional intelligence to not say a thing? Because that person who's the manager of the shop, you're not their boss. You're the boss of someone who's above them. And there's so many little things where I really wholeheartedly believe this is the difference in business is the difference between leadership and management, or truly success is about being a good leader. Second thing, they can do it. Let them. Let go. Be outcomes focused. When we opened our second shop in Tai Hang, at that time I was very hands-on. We had opened the shop, I was in the shop, I was making the coffee, I was in the kitchen, I was, and the store manager, Rico, he pulled me aside. He was a bit frustrated. He said, boss, come here. He said, boss, we can do it. Go home. He said, trust us. And I was like, it's a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, they don't need, in leadership, yeah, the staff need to know we're willing to get our hands dirty. They need to know that we're not afraid to do their job, but also they need to know that we trust them and we can walk away and not be there for 2 or 3 days because we trust them and they respect that more. And I think this is a really hard thing for a lot of us in leadership and management to do, is to just let go. Let them do it. They can do it. It's okay. And for me, what I've learned is if you take that approach, guess what? People have ability. People are capable. It is not about me. It is about us. Leaders say we, managers say I. This for me is a really big one. So many times you see people who are in management positions and they always use the word I. And it's just so lacking in inspiration and motivation. And when like for example, when I'm in a meeting with my team and I'm always saying we, it means that I'm including them. It's inclusion, it's teamwork, it's and I'm just a big believer in leaders say we, managers say I. And I think what I really wanted, one of my goals this year is to work on try and create a culture where we make sure this permeates our whole culture. It's not just me saying we, so that because sometimes when you go into a retail shop, the retail manager will be there and they'll go over the retail shelf and they'll say, oh, I've got this product or I've got that product, you know what I mean? I think it's important that we try and create a culture where our managers are saying we have this product, we have that. It's such a healthier culture to build. When we screw up, I blame myself. When we kick goals, I praise the team. Everything rises and falls on leadership. I'm a really big believer that everything rises and falls on leadership. Because it doesn't hurt you to blame yourself, but it does hurt them if you blame them. At the same time, it does not benefit you if you praise yourself, but it does benefit you if you praise them. And I have this rule within my business that I pretty much, it's very, very rare that I'll ever pull someone aside and try and discipline them or scold them or get them in trouble. I'm always encouraging. And I just think that when it comes to emotional intelligence, it works better for you in the long run if you take that approach. This is a real tough one in business, I think. But working with people more capable than you is a good thing. I am fortunate that I work with a couple of people in my business who are far more capable than myself in some areas. And when we first started the business, I really struggled with this, particularly my business partner James. He's a genius when it comes to numbers and spreadsheets and legal stuff. But what I've learned is that when it comes to him and the other shareholders, in my involvement in dealing with them, if I'm working towards an outcomes approach, all that does is give them more respect for me. And trusting and empowering them to do what they do and do it really well, also it just gives them more respect for me. But also highly capable people, just because someone's highly capable in a particular area of expertise, it doesn't mean that they want to lead. Sometimes people are incredibly capable in a particular area of expertise, and they will follow someone who's a leader because that person is a good leader. There's a big difference between intellectual capability and leadership. This is a really important one for me. I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 7 years. You cannot grow if you want to grow. You cannot operate today how you operated yesterday. A really simple example is when we opened one shop, I was the barista making every coffee. When we had 3 shops, I couldn't make every cup of coffee. What I do on a daily basis just has to change. And every time we open a new shop, I take this step back, which I'm happening at the moment because we're making some big changes in our business this year. We're employing a general manager who's going to start in a week or 2. He's going to come in, he's going to take some of my current responsibilities off me. And I'm like, well, whenever this happens, I think to myself, well, I feel a bit fearful. I'm like, am I out of a job now? Like, as I've built the business for 7 years, I manage myself out of a position, and sometimes I think, well, what am I going to do now? But it's a good opportunity because I go away, I sit down and I go, okay, I'm still the boss. I'm still sort of the leader. But how do I operate? What do I do on a daily basis from now on? How do I keep building and growing the business? And they're really healthy times for me because it helps me think about, okay, if we want, now we've got 7, like when we had 1 shop, I was going to 2 and 3 and 4, I had to think how we do that. Now we've got 7 shops, okay, well, how do we go to 15 shops now? And how do I operate in order for us to get there? And but I know in my mind, with Fineprint at the moment, this coming year, I need to operate different how I did last year. And I'm starting to formulate that in my mind and how I'm going to do that. But it's really important that we go through these changes as we build our businesses. It's lonely at the top. So you better know why you're there. When you're successful, whether you own a business, even if it's a small business, whatever it is, when you're at the top in that particular organisation, there's loneliness because there's some things that only you can deal with, and there's some experiences that only you have had. And if you try and you can't share those experiences with other people for whatever reason it might be. Could have been a difficult situation with a staff member that you've had to deal with. It could be just an emotional feeling you've had that's associated to your role or position. But I really do believe having a why will help you overcome anyhow. But also having a why will also create a culture whereby people who work for you are working for something that's bigger than themselves. It's bigger and better than who we are and what we are as human beings. But I'm a big believer in that. Having a why will help you overcome anyhow. We are meant to fail on the way to achievement. I think, failures in heroic minds are stepping stones to success. I won the Australian Barista Championship it's only a small thing, winning the Australian Barista Championship. I won it for the first time in 2007. But I think the first time I competed in the Australian Barista Championship was 2003. It took me 5 years to win that competition, but I entered every year. Kept going back. But the year that I finally won, oh man, it felt incredible. And I'm 100% confident it felt so much better because I'd failed 4 times already. So whatever it is you're going for in life, whatever it is you're working towards, whatever your goal is, don't give up, because when you finally achieve that goal, even though you failed, it's going to feel so much better when you finally get it. Be hard on your opinions. I think for a lot of us, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, you might laugh at what I've written there. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. But Tim Minchin said, he would say, opinions differ slightly from assholes, that yours should be truly and thoroughly examined. But identify your biases. Your prejudices, your privileges. The other person may be right, and letting them be right and run with it may just benefit you. This happens to us all the time when it comes to developing new menu items. When someone's got an idea, a new menu item, they're really passionate about it, and they're getting constructive feedback, you've got to be able to take it. And that constructive feedback is coming from people, everyone just cares about the business, and they just want things to be better. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. There is everything wrong with being too stubborn to accept that you are wrong. There is power in positive thinking. This might be a controversial one, but I'm a big believer that there's power in positive thinking. But I just want to follow that up with saying this. Positive thinking will not empower you to do anything, but it will empower you to do everything better than negative thinking will. And the last thing is, for me, my definition of an entrepreneur is choosing to live today how most people will not, so that hopefully one day I can live how most people cannot. All right, thank you for obliging me.